Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. In my previous life, I married my husband, Ethan Miller. When I was 6 months pregnant, his twin brother died unexpectedly. My in-laws, heartbroken over the loss, were deeply concerned about their pregnant eldest daughter-in-law, Zoe Miller. They suggested that Ethan take on the responsibility of caring for both households and look after Zoe. Everyone around me advised me not to agree to it. I also thought it was absurd and had no intention of saying yes. But Ethan reasoned with me, speaking from both logic and emotion. He said that before his brother passed, he begged Ethan to look after Zoe. He reminded me how much his brother had sacrificed for him and for the entire family, how all of them owed his brother too much. Ethan told me I was the one he loved, and he was only going to support Zoe materially. Once Zoe gave birth and helped raise the child, he wouldn't have anything more to do with her. I loved Ethan very, very much. And as a soon-to-be mother, I genuinely felt sympathy for Zoe's situation, having lost her husband. After Ethan's repeated persuasion, I softened and agreed. I thought he was only going to give her a bit of help, some financial support perhaps, and once she had the baby, she would learn to stand on her own and take responsibility as a mother. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Zoe, also 6 months pregnant, was frail and constantly sick. She couldn't do any physical labor. My in-laws, deeply fond of their eldest daughter-in-law, felt sorry for her, and so did Ethan. From then on, everything in the household revolved around Zoe and her unborn child. She didn't have to do any chores, spent her days lounging around, and enjoyed the best food and drinks. Ethan even sent all his military subsidies to Zoe to support her lifestyle. In the letters he sent me, he urged me to be generous, to be understanding, and to help his parents take care of the delicate and fragile Zoe. But Ethan, so far away, had no idea that the sister-in-law he insisted needed caring for wouldn't even lift a finger to help if a bottle of oil fell to the floor. She spent her days idle, eating luxuriously while I, also heavily pregnant, was eating the worst food, forced to work the fields, wash clothes, cook meals, and feed pigs. Back then, I was stupid and naive. Even when I felt that something wasn't right, even when I was filled with resentment, all it took was one of Ethan's affectionate letters to give me new energy. And so, with my swollen belly, I pushed myself until the day I gave birth. That day, things were dangerously intense. My mother-in-law, Margaret Miller, ordered me to fetch water, and I slipped on the road and started bleeding. I don't remember how I gave birth, just that I fell unconscious and didn't wake up for several days. When I finally came to, Ethan had rushed home from the military. I had given birth to a baby girl. Around the same time, Zoe also gave birth. She had a baby boy. The delivery left me seriously weakened. I couldn't even get out of bed for 2 weeks. Zoe, surprisingly considerate, helped feed my daughter since I didn't have enough breast milk. Ethan, briefly home on leave, treated me with rare tenderness. Even my usually harsh in-laws softened a bit. For a short while, I actually felt cared for and warm. That made me all the more eager to repay their kindness. I worked even harder with all my heart for the sake of this family. I took on all the farm work. Before dawn, I was already up cutting grass and hauling water. By the time Zoe and her baby woke up, I had already filled the water jars and brought in a full bundle of hay. After a quick breakfast, I picked up a hoe and went down to the fields. Naturally, the child I'd just given birth to was left in the care of the always delicate Zoe. Time flew by. Before I knew it, the children were 2 years old. Zoe's son could already walk and run, but my daughter Lily was terribly weak. She was constantly sick and could only crawl. My in-laws said Lily was like that because she'd been injured while still in my womb. I didn't quite believe them. So, I took Lily to the county hospital for a checkup. The results hit me like a bolt of lightning. Lily had been born with polio. I don't remember how I made it back home carrying her. When I pushed open the courtyard gate, I was met with laughter and joy. Ethan had come home on leave again. He had brought gifts for Zoe, the kids, and his parents. I was the only one left out. My heart was consumed with worry over Lily's condition, and I didn't even realize anything was wrong at first. I cried as I told them what the doctor had said. My in-laws simply said, "It's fate. We don't have money to treat her. Just raise her like this, one day at a time." Zoe burst into tears. But Ethan remained silent. From the look on his face, it was clear he agreed with what his parents said. I was the only one who refused to accept it. If I didn't fight for my child, who would? I declared firmly that I would get treatment for Lily no matter what. Everyone opposed me. My in-laws said the family had no money, that the treatment would take years, and there was no guarantee it would work. They didn't want to invest time and energy into something that might never pay off. Ethan tried to persuade me too. He told me we could always have another child. There was no need to waste effort on something that couldn't be changed. He stayed home for only a week before leaving again. And when he did, he didn't leave me a single cent. Just like before, he handed all his money to his parents and his beloved sister-in-law Zoe. I didn't believe in fate, so I started traveling everywhere seeking doctors and treatments for Lily. When my attention turned entirely to her, and I stopped prioritizing the household, my in-laws began to complain. They said I was irresponsible, that I didn't work and just ran around aimlessly all day. They spread rumors in the village that I was cursed by birth, that Lily's disabled legs were a result of my misfortune. They even said that if Ethan had never married me, his twin brother wouldn't have died. I endured both physical and emotional torment, but never gave up. To keep them from taking out their anger on Lily, I worked nonstop like a spinning top, taking care of all the farm work during the day and searching for doctors at night. Eventually, I found a doctor who was not only kind but also highly skilled. He taught me massage and physical therapy techniques and used acupuncture to assist with Lily's treatment. My efforts were not in vain. By the time Lily turned 5, she no longer had to crawl across the floor. She could slowly stand and move on her own. I was ecstatic. I couldn't wait to write Ethan a letter to tell him the good news. But just after I sent it, Ethan came home unexpectedly. He brought with him news I couldn't accept. He had been promoted, and the military had granted him permission to bring family members with him. But he planned to take Zoe and her son, not me and Lily. Why should Zoe get to go with him? Of course I objected. For the past 2 years, I'd had enough. Enough of Ethan's parents ordering me around. Enough of Zoe acting entitled. Enough of working myself to the bone while still trying to heal my daughter. I needed a break. I wanted to go with Ethan to follow him to the base. Maybe then I could find better treatment for Lily and give us both a real future. But Ethan refused. He said he felt sorry for Zoe, and so did his parents. They claimed I hadn't gotten pregnant again in 5 years and probably never would. They insisted they had to raise their precious first grandson. Zoe had to go with Ethan. There was no room for discussion. If I didn't accept it, they said, then Ethan would just divorce me. With no one to support me and no strength left to fight, I compromised once again. I stood by helplessly and watched as Ethan took Zoe and her son to the military base. From that moment on, Ethan no longer cared about me or Lily. Besides a cold, formal letter once a month, he never sent us a dime. My in-laws were harsh and demanding. They would never lift a finger to ease my burden. With no one to rely on, and unwilling to give up on Lily, I began a life of endless hardship and labor. But a mother's love is the most powerful and unstoppable force in the world. I gave everything I had. And in the 2 years that followed, I completely cured Lily's condition. She could walk like any other child. Then one day, Ethan returned again. He had been promoted once more, and said he wanted to take Lily and me with him this time. My heart soared. I happily packed our things, ready to leave with him. But on the day we were supposed to depart, Ethan's father fell down the stairs and broke his leg. I had no choice but to cancel the trip and stay behind to care for him. Ethan took Lily and left. I devoted myself entirely to caring for my paralyzed father-in-law, hoping he would recover soon so I could finally leave and reunite with my daughter. But just as he healed, my mother-in-law injured herself. My hopes were dashed once again. While I was staying home to care for her, my good friend Claire, my sister-in-law, who had married into another village, came to visit. When she saw my situation, she told me something that shocked me to my core. She said that Zoe had already given birth to 2 more children while living with Ethan, and everyone outside the village believed that Zoe and Ethan were husband and wife. I didn't want to believe what Claire had told me, but I had no choice. Deep down, I knew she was probably right. After all, I'd seen with my own eyes how Ethan had changed toward me over the years. Cold, distant, and utterly indifferent. To find out the truth for myself, I went to the military base where Ethan was stationed. I didn't see Ethan right away. Instead, I was first led to a standalone villa where Zoe was living in comfort and luxury. She was sitting on the couch, her expression tender as she watched two children playing nearby. The little girl looked just like Zoe, and the boy was the spitting image of Ethan. When she saw me, Zoe wasn't even fazed. She calmly told me the truth. She and Ethan had begun living as husband and wife the very day they arrived at the base. She became pregnant shortly after and gave birth to twins. The reason they never told me was simple. They were using me. She even bragged smugly that the daughter I had struggled to care for and heal, Lily, wasn't even my child. She told me the baby I had given birth to had died at birth. Ethan's parents, afraid I wouldn't continue working for the family like a servant, had handed Lily to me just to keep me obedient. Then she laughed and said, Ethan's parents had only pretended to be ill all those years to keep me busy, to prevent me from interfering with her and Ethan's loving life together. Zoe added that Ethan was preparing to officially divorce me, so he could marry her without any obstacles. The realization that I had been used, lied to, and betrayed for so many years sent rage flooding through my chest. I stormed into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and charged at Zoe. She screamed and ran for the door while I chased after her, shouting that she and Ethan were monsters, that I would expose them for their filthy affair, that I would make them pay for everything they had done. But I never got that chance because I ran at Zoe with a knife. Lily called for the guards. When they arrived, they shot me. I collapsed in a pool of my own blood. And as I lay there dying, I couldn't let go. I couldn't accept it. I died filled with anger and regret. I don't know how long I drifted in darkness. Then suddenly, I heard a familiar woman's voice. Stop writing that letter. Hurry home. Your man's back on leave. He brought back tons of stuff. I rubbed my eyes and looked up. Standing in front of me was Dana, the neighbor I used to be close with. She looked startled. What? What's wrong with you? Did you lose your mind? She saw me staring and stammering, unable to form a full sentence. Her legs looked perfectly fine. She gave me a light push and said, Why are you just standing here? Hurry home. If you're late, that shameless Zoe is going to snatch up everything your husband brought back. Don't bother mailing that letter. Just tell him in person. I looked down at the certified letter still clutched in my hand, then back at Dana's healthy legs. Instinctively, I bit my finger. The pain was real. So, what was happening? I had gone back in time. I couldn't believe such a miracle could be real. Dana, what year is it right now? She frowned and said, 1980. What's with the weird question, girl? You've lost it, huh? 1980. I had actually returned to 1980, that exact day in my last life. This was the day Lily had finally stood on her own 2 feet and begun walking slowly but surely. I had been so excited that I rushed to send Ethan a letter to tell him the good news. And right after I sent it, Ethan came back from the army with an announcement that he had permission to bring family members to live with him on base. But the person he planned to take wasn't me. It was Zoe. With all of this rushing back to me, I didn't hesitate. I took off running toward home. When I arrived and opened the gate, I saw everything clearly. Lily, who had polio, was gripping the chair in the yard, practicing standing. It was something I had forced her to do every day in the past life. I didn't just make her train on her own. I trained with her. Even after exhausting days of farm work, I would spend 2 more hours massaging and doing therapy with her. Lily only learned to walk because I never gave up. Day after day, night after night, people say nurture is greater than birth. And I knew in my heart I had never mistreated her. Whenever I had something good to eat, I saved it for her. I poured all my love and energy into raising her. And how did she repay me? After being taken away by Ethan and Zoe, it took less than 2 years for them to erase everything I had done. That's why I died so quickly in my last life. I'm not letting Lily out of my sight, I said, still gripping the knife. Call the guards, huh? I looked at Lily standing there in the yard and smiled silently. You ungrateful little snake. So this is what you really are. In this life, you can forget about ever becoming a normal person again. Just accept your fate as a tearing my gaze away from her. I scanned the yard for my other enemies. But I didn't see Ethan's parents, nor did I see Ethan or Zoe. So where could they be? I didn't go into the house. Instead, I circled around to the back and stood beside a window, pressing close to the wall. From inside, I heard soft voices discussing something. "Mom, I've been promoted," Ethan said. "The army's allowing me to bring family with me." Margaret's voice lit up. "That's great news. Let Zoe and our eldest grandson go with you." Zoe responded in her usual soft, delicate tone. "How can I? That spot should go to your wife. I can't take her place. She'll be upset." Then Ethan's father chimed in with a cold laugh. "Upset? So what? It's not her decision to make." "Exactly," Margaret added. "Even if she's upset, she'll just have to deal with it. If she dares cause a fuss, your father and I will step in and put her in her place." Ethan sounded a little hesitant. "You don't have to be so harsh. She is still my wife, and she hasn't actually done anything wrong. You don't know the full story." Margaret said, "That girl Molly, she's completely useless. She's lazy, always using Lily's illness as an excuse to run around instead of working. Your father and I are run ragged, and she doesn't show even a shred of gratitude. Thank goodness your dear Zoe is here to help us out. Without her, we couldn't get by." I already knew Margaret and her husband were horrible people, but hearing them say these lies so boldly still made me tremble with rage. Inside, Ethan stood up in frustration. "I'm going to talk to Molly," he said. "Ask her why she's acting this way." "Don't bother," his father stopped him. "What good will it do? She's just a woman with a disabled kid. It's not easy for her either. Let's just pity her and be done with it." Then he added, "Zoe is a good woman. After your brother died, she didn't remarry. She gave our family a strong grandson. You owe it to your brother to take care of her. It's what he would have wanted." Margaret chimed in. "Zoe's kind, obedient, and so thoughtful. She doesn't just care for your father and me. She even helps take care of Lily. You won't find a girl like her again. Not even with a lantern in broad daylight. You promised your brother you'd look after them. That's why Zoe and our grandson must go with you. This is final. These two old vipers. I gave everything I had. My time, my energy, my heart, and in their eyes, it was worth nothing. Garbage. And now they were selling me out without a second thought, but getting mad would only hurt me." I took a deep breath and kept listening. A few minutes later, the decision was made. Ethan and his father left the house. Inside, only Zoe and Margaret remained. I was about to leave when I heard Margaret lower her voice and say, "Zoe, we fought hard to get you this chance. You better not waste it. I want to hold another grandchild soon. You hear? You had twins with the first one. You and Ethan should be able to do it again. Our family's future depends on you." So Margaret and her husband had been pushing this from the beginning. They were the ones making sure Zoe and Ethan ended up together. Well, that was perfect. On the way over, I had worried that they might not know that maybe they were innocent. But now I had no reason to hold back. If they were all in on it, I wouldn't feel guilty for anything I did next. I walked away from the window and took a few moments outside to calm myself before stepping back into the yard. Ethan and his father were there, and when they heard me coming, they turned around. The look Ethan gave me was full of irritation. "Where have you been?" he snapped. "Why are you just getting back now?" I looked him straight in the eyes and said slowly, clearly, and without a hint of fear, "Where could I have gone? All I do around here is slave away in the fields like a beast of burden. Your parents are getting old, always complaining about their backs and legs. Your precious sister-in-law is too delicate to lift a finger without falling sick every few days. So, who else do you think is left to work in this house? Just me, the unlucky one." Ethan's face darkened in an instant. He had clearly swallowed every lie Margaret fed him. In his eyes, I was now a cheater, a lazy freeloader, and a liar. "Molly," he snapped. "What kind of sarcastic garbage are you spouting now? You think I don't know the truth about you." "What truth?" I shot back. "You think someone else is doing all the work in this house besides me?" "You're being ridiculous," Ethan barked. "I've been holding back out of respect for you. But don't think I'm blind to everything you've done. I'm warning you. Stay in line." "Well, thanks for the warning, I replied, my voice sharp. But if you're so sure I've done something shameful, why don't you spell it out? Or better yet, let's go find the village chief and the whole town. We'll call a meeting and lay everything out in public. There wasn't a trace of tenderness in me. No soft words, no submissive glances, not like the woman he remembered. My tone was blunt and confrontational, and that only enraged Ethan more. I'll go right now, he shouted. Let's settle this. Knowing that calling the village to witness would expose them, Ethan's father rushed to grab his arm and hold him back. Margaret and Zoe ran out of the house and grabbed him too. Zoe, of course, played her usual sweet role and said gently, Ethan, you've only just come home after years away. Why is Molly causing such a scene? Margaret raised her voice in outrage. Exactly. My son is serving the country. Maybe he doesn't have any great achievements, but he's doing hard work. Molly, how dare you shout at my son like that? Do you even have any respect for the law? His hard work has nothing to do with me, I replied flatly. Has he ever given me a dime? Ever helped me with anything? Ethan's hands were trembling. Molly, are you even being reasonable? I send most of my monthly pay home. I only keep a little for myself. Don't pretend like you haven't received it. I have the receipts. Oh really? Funny. I've never seen a single cent of it. I didn't know you were so generous. I turned to look at Margaret, her husband, and Zoe. Anyone here ever see the money Ethan supposedly sent home? None of them could meet my eyes. I raised my voice. What? Did the post office swallow it up? Maybe we should go ask the postmaster and get this sorted out. Seeing that I was no longer the same submissive woman I used to be, Margaret panicked. She began shouting at me, calling me vicious and ungrateful. Then, in a sudden fit of fake rage, she leapt toward me, ready to hit me. Zoe, ever the saint, rushed in to stop her, only to conveniently trip and fall to the ground. She lay there pretending to be unconscious. Ethan, your sister-in-law fainted, Margaret cried out. Hurry, get her to the hospital. Don't let anything happen to her. Panicked, Ethan and Margaret rushed Zoe off to the town clinic. I didn't follow. Instead, I walked straight to the chicken coop, grabbed a large rooster, and with one swift stroke, slit its throat. Blood sprayed everywhere. But inside, I felt nothing but pure satisfaction. This was only the beginning. The real show was yet to come. The Millers thought they could plot against me, break me, use me. But now I would repay every bit of their cruelty with interest. Let them wait. Let them watch. I was just getting started. Soon after Zoe was taken to the hospital, she miraculously woke up. With tears in her eyes, she said that in order to avoid causing a rift between Ethan and me, she had decided not to go with him to the military base. She would stay behind to take care of the kids and Ethan's parents. Naturally, Margaret and her husband were outraged. They began cursing me, accusing me of slandering Zoe, twisting the truth, and turning Ethan against her. Ethan, meanwhile, stood silently in the hospital room, his brows furrowed. Something wasn't sitting right. His parents had painted me as a lazy, ungrateful woman. But the way I had looked when I returned, filthy, sunburnt, my hands covered in calluses, was that the look of someone who sat around doing nothing? And then there was Zoe, lying pristine and pale on the bed, clean as a porcelain doll, not a trace of labor on her. And on top of that, I claimed I had never received the money he sent home. That stung him. That lingered in his mind. Doubt began to grow in Ethan's heart. Ethan cut off Margaret's harsh rant directed at me. Mom, Dad, he said sternly. I want to know who's been collecting the money I've been sending home all these years. Faced with Ethan's serious expression, Margaret hesitated for a moment before finally admitting, Your father and I, we collected it. Why didn't you tell Molly? Why didn't you let her use the money? It's not like we didn't want her to use it. Margaret fumbled. It's just you know how she is. So stubborn, so obsessed with Lily's treatment. We were afraid she'd blow all the money on useless things, so we secretly held it back. Ethan's brows furrowed deeply. So, she really hasn't spent a single cent of the money I sent? Of course she has, Margaret rushed to say. The cooking oil, the vinegar, the salt, everything in this house was bought with your money. But the truth was already too hard to swallow. Ethan's face darkened. He stood up abruptly and stormed out of the room. Margaret and her husband exchanged a glance and hurried after him. "Son, where are you going?" Margaret called out. "Listen to me, Molly. You saw how she is. That temper of hers. She dares talk back to us right in front of you. Just imagine how she treats us when you're not around." Ethan gave his mother a cold look. "So, you're saying she bullies you? Fine. Come home with me. We'll settle this in person, face to face." No, Margaret panicked. "Son, this is all just a misunderstanding about money. Your father and we weren't trying to keep it from her out of greed. We just didn't want her to spend it recklessly. And we were worried that once she had money, she might leave. She's not like Zoe. Zoe stayed willingly, even gave us a grandson. But what if one day Molly walks out and abandons that disabled girl? What would we do then?" Ethan didn't say another word, but his face remained cold and unreadable. At that moment, a villager from town happened to pass by and called out with a friendly smile. "Hey, Ethan, who's sick at your place?" "It's Zoe," Margaret answered quickly. "She's always getting sick. Such a delicate girl, just like some spoiled city princess. Honestly, if it weren't for Molly holding everything together, who knows how we'd survive?" Ethan heard every word clearly and turned his head sharply to look at Margaret. "Didn't you say Molly was lazy and good for nothing?" Margaret hadn't expected an outsider to expose her like that. Her face turned crimson. "Son, we didn't mean to lie to you. It's true Molly's not that lazy. She has helped us a lot, but she's got a terrible temper. Always complaining about us, and she fights with your sister-in-law all the time. I just thought that if you took Zoe with you to the base, the two of them wouldn't have to deal with each other anymore." Ethan was furious. "So that's your solution? Flip the truth upside down? Call white black?" Margaret's voice rose again, desperate. "We didn't have a choice. You promised your brother you'd look after Zoe and the baby. But Molly, she's been against it from the start. She fights with us constantly. She wants to separate from your sister-in-law, but Zoe's too weak to live on her own, and she can't raise the child alone either." "That's still no excuse to lie," Ethan snapped. "Looks like I'll need to rethink this whole bringing family to the base plan." "Son," Margaret said quickly, "that's our fault. We didn't think it through. But you can't take Molly with you. What about us? Who will do all the work in the fields if she leaves? You made a promise to take care of Zoe and the baby. If you abandon them now, what does that make you?" Listening to Margaret's nonstop shouting, Ethan suddenly felt like a fool. He wasn't stupid. He realized now that his parents had set him up. They'd twisted everything, made him blame Molly unjustly, and when he thought about how he had yelled at her earlier, humiliated her with no mercy, regret weighed heavily on him. He shook them off and headed home in long, determined strides. As soon as Ethan left, Zoe, who had been faking her illness, suddenly sat up, perfectly fine. She and Margaret, along with Ethan's father, left the hospital and rushed home together, whispering back and forth about how to deal with what was coming next. Ethan walked fast, his long legs carrying him quickly down the road. His mood was dark and heavy. Now that he knew he had wronged Molly, he was determined to apologize and explain everything properly. But when he reached the front gate, he froze. From inside the house, he heard the sound of a child crying and Molly's voice yelling angrily. "What are you crying for? All you ever do is eat. You're hungry? Well, guess what? So am I." I snapped. "You're not the only one with a mouth around here. I've got one too. But apparently, it's only you who gets to use yours to eat all the good stuff." Ethan kicked open the door in a few quick strides. What he saw stunned him. Lily was sitting on the ground, her body covered in dirt, holding a bowl in her hands. Inside were only a few wilted vegetable leaves. Next to her sat Logan, Ethan's nephew, clutching his own bowl filled with the same pitiful greens. Both children had tears in their eyes, looking up at him as they cried. And me? I sat at the table, legs spread in a relaxed, dominant posture with a huge bowl in front of me filled to the brim with chicken. I had a drumstick in one hand, grease dripping from my mouth as I tore into it with obvious pleasure. Ethan froze. "You're eating this all by yourself?" I didn't even look at him. I just kept chewing, devouring the drumstick, then quickly finished off the chicken breast and a wing. Once I was done, I shoved the bowl aside, stood up, and walked out of the room without so much as a glance back. Veins popped on Ethan's forehead as he clenched his jaw. Swallowing his anger, he crouched down to soothe Lily and Logan, giving them a few pieces of meat from what was left. At that moment, Margaret, her husband, and Zoe returned. The kids ran to them, sobbing, and told them everything. Their voices overlapped, saying the same thing. Aunt Molly killed the chicken and ate it all by herself. She didn't give us any. Margaret and her husband had no idea why I'd suddenly started acting like this. But to them, this was the perfect opportunity, a chance to paint me as cruel and selfish. So they launched into another round of scolding, accusing me of all kinds of wrongs. For once though, Ethan didn't join in. He stood there silently, saying nothing. When he walked into the bedroom, I had already washed up and was just about to slip off my shoes and lie down. I didn't even lift an eyelid when I saw him. Every time he'd returned home before, I would fawn over him, ask how he'd been, run around like a servant, making sure he was comfortable. But not this time. I didn't ask a thing. I didn't even look at him. My face was a cold, unreadable mask. He must have felt it. The shift, the rejection. I expected him to blow up at me, to scold me for my behavior. But to my surprise, he held it in. "Molly," he said, breaking the silence. "Can we talk?" Sure, I nodded, my eyes icy. "Go ahead. You talk first." He looked at me for a second, then turned his head. He couldn't meet my eyes. "I asked my parents about the money," he said. "They admitted they've been the ones collecting it from the post office. They used it all." And I shot back with a sneer. "So that's it. I'm supposed to feel grateful. You want me to thank you for everything I've gone through these past few years?" "All I meant was," he stammered. "You've had it hard. You've had it hard." I repeated bitterly. One sentence, and everything I endured just disappears. "Is that how cheap my suffering is to you?" I stared at him coldly. He thought I would soften, say it was okay. But I didn't blame him. How could I not blame him? When I thought about the truth, I discovered just before I died, I wanted nothing more than to rip this heartless man to shreds. I stayed silent, but my eyes said it all. Ethan was clearly uncomfortable, unsure of what to say next. "I know what my parents did was wrong," he said finally. "But you weren't entirely innocent either. Just now, how could you eat like that and ignore the kids? That really disappointed me. So, what are you going to do about it?" I asked bluntly. Ethan was stunned. He had expected me to apologize, say I was wrong, promise to change, to never act like that again. The last thing he expected was for me to flip it back on him. I wasn't playing by his script anymore. And now he didn't know what to do. He stiffened. "Don't you want to know why I came back this time?" I gave a cold chuckle. Hearing me laugh like that only made him angrier. "I got promoted," he said. "I can bring family with me to the base. Mom and Dad want me to take Zoe and the boy." "Then take them," I said flatly. "No need to inform me next time. I'm not interested in your life." Ethan stared at me as I casually climbed into bed and lay down completely unbothered. He had planned this carefully, even delivered the news in a way that invited a fight, hoping I would push back, beg to go with him. Then he could scold me a little, act superior, and finally agree, giving himself a way out. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. I didn't beg. I didn't even flinch. I just turned my back and fell asleep. Ethan stood there frozen in place, not knowing what to do next. Lying on the bed, my back turned to him, I felt Ethan watching me. I didn't have to see him to know it. Every time he came home on leave, I could feel the affection in his eyes, the lingering tenderness he still held for me. But this time there was nothing. Not a flicker of warmth. I knew he felt it too, that an invisible mountain now stood between us. That the sweetness we once shared had faded into something unreachable. That suffocating feeling in his chest made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. He felt like he was losing me for good, and that terrified him. Ethan gathered his courage and approached the bed. Just as he reached out about to touch me, there was a knock at the door. Margaret's voice called from outside, saying that Logan was vomiting and had diarrhea. Ethan didn't hesitate. He rushed out, scooped Logan up and ran him straight to the hospital. Logan was sick for an entire week. His condition kept coming and going. Margaret, her husband, Zoe, and Ethan took turns staying at the hospital day and night. I was the only one who didn't visit, not even once. But I wasn't idle. Margaret told everyone I had killed all the chickens at home and eaten them by myself. Not even a chicken tail left for anyone else. She said, I was gorging myself while doing no work at all. Didn't feed the pigs, didn't cut grass, didn't tend the fields or clean the house. I wandered around aimlessly, chatting with women in the village, acting like I had no responsibilities at all. Ethan thought his mother was being overly dramatic, exaggerating things as always. Still, just to be sure, he went back home to see for himself. And just as Margaret described, the place was a mess, like a pigsty. Dirty clothes were scattered everywhere. The floor was covered in dust. It was filthy, disorganized, neglected. Lily was crawling around outside, her hair tangled, lice visible on her scalp. No one seemed to be looking after her. Seeing all this, Ethan was furious. He went out looking for me in secret, and finally found me in Claire's fields. In my past life, I remembered clearly. Today was the day Claire would be working in the fields when a rock slide came down from the mountain and crushed her legs, leaving her permanently disabled. I had been watching her closely for days, determined to change what had happened. And today I succeeded. I managed to pull Claire out in time. She was hurt, yes, but compared to her past life where both legs had to be amputated, this was only a minor injury. I carried her on my back and rushed her to the hospital only to run into Ethan, hurrying in the same direction. He helped me carry Claire the rest of the way and get her treatment. Claire was a woman like me. Her husband gone most of the year, her children to care for on her own. So I volunteered to stay and help her during her hospital stay. I stayed with her at the hospital for a full week. During that time, I didn't return home and I didn't check on what Ethan's family was up to. But the Miller family didn't stop making a scene about me. Not for a second. The loudest ones were Margaret and Zoe. Margaret squinted at me with those slanted, beady eyes and said, You must have heard by now. We've decided that Zoe will be the one going to the base. Don't try anything funny. Zoe put on her usual fragile act, approaching me with tears in her eyes. Molly, I never wanted to take your spot, but Logan needs to go to school. I want to give him a better future. Please, I'm begging you. As a widow, as a woman who has suffered, please let me have the chance to go with Ethan. I gave her a faint smile. If you're begging, then show some sincerity. What do you want? She asked cautiously. Money, I said. All the money you've taken from Ethan over the years, every cent. Give it back to me and I might consider stepping aside. Otherwise, why should I let you take my spot? Zoe glared at me, her face twisted with anger. I'm not giving you any money. I'm going. It's already settled. You know Ethan's parents have approved it. You can't change their minds. Well then, I said coolly. Why are you even here talking to me? Just go pack your things and follow Ethan to the base. I savored the look on her face. Are you sure you're really Ethan's family? I said slowly, narrowing my eyes. What do you think the military would do if they found out Ethan abandoned his wife to bring his sister-in-law as his official dependent? What do you think the leadership would say? Zoe's face instantly changed. Fine, I'll give you the money. Isn't that what you want? I've changed my mind, I said, smiling faintly. Now, besides the money, you'll need to get on your knees and beg me. I want to see some real sincerity. Zoe's expression twisted into something bitter and humiliated. I tilted my head. You can always refuse. I mean, I've got nothing to lose. I'm barefoot in this fight. You think you can sneak onto the base with Ethan without my permission? I'll report you personally. Let's see how far you get then. In the end, Zoe caved, her pride shattered. She knelt in front of me and bowed her head to the ground. I stared at her, her face twisted with shame, and inwardly scoffed at how satisfying it was to see her like this. 3 days later, she handed me a thick stack of cash, over 2,000 yuan. I'd never even seen that much money in my past life. Money made everything easier. Now, I just had to wait. Wait for Ethan to take Zoe with him to the military base. Wait for them to start their affair. And have a child together, just like last time. Ethan, meanwhile, was a mess torn in every direction. If he were honest with himself, he knew he wanted to take me, Molly, with him as his official dependent. But he had already told his parents his decision, and they'd thrown a tantrum, especially Margaret, who cried, screamed, and threatened to kill herself. It left him exhausted and unsure what to do. He knew he needed to talk to me about it. But I didn't come home. I was staying at Claire's place. Every time he came looking, I found some reason not to see him. He didn't have the pride to force a confrontation. So the matter dragged on until the very last day of his leave. That's when he finally forced me to come home. He thought we could sit down and seriously discuss the matter of who would go with him. He had mentally rehearsed every word, but just as he began to speak, I interrupted him. You promised your brother you'd take care of Zoe. Go ahead and take her. I don't have any objections. Everything he'd planned to say fell apart. My easy agreement didn't come for him. It unsettled him. This wasn't the reaction he wanted. He didn't want a calm, detached Molly. He wanted me to cry, to argue, to beg him not to take her. That would mean I still cared, that I still needed him. That would have given him a reason to fight back against his parents' pressure. But I was indifferent, too composed. I gave him nothing. Ethan stared at my unreadable face, and all he could manage was a dry, stiff promise. Molly, I'll work hard. You just wait at home for a little while. I'll come back for you and the kid. I smiled politely. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. Just let him think whatever he wanted. With that resolved, his parents were thrilled. Zoe and Logan were thrilled. I didn't complain about anything. I smiled and stayed quiet. Only Ethan felt heavy, his heart weighed down and uneasy. He was scheduled to leave the next day. There were so many things he wanted to say to me, but I had no interest in listening. That night, he thought maybe we could reconnect as husband and wife. They say couples fight at the head of the bed and make up at the foot of it. But when he tried, I turned him away coldly, using my body as a barrier. He remembered clearly this wasn't the time of the month for me. That meant I simply didn't want him. He felt humiliated. It wasn't that he absolutely had to sleep with me. He just thought after everything, maybe we could try to have another healthy child. His parents had been pressuring him about that too. But I didn't care. I turned my back on him and fell asleep peacefully while he lay awake all night, tossing and turning. Several times he reached out to hold me, then pulled back. Finally, he mustered the nerve to touch my shoulder. I suddenly sat up. I need to check on Lily. I got up, dressed quickly and left the room. But when he went to Lily's room, I wasn't there. Worried, Ethan checked the front and back of the house, searching for me everywhere, but I was gone. All he could do was return to the room and wait. That night, Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for me until dawn. When I finally returned home, he looked at me with a stiff face and asked where I'd been. There was clear impatience in his tone. Claire needed help, I replied flatly. I went to take care of her. He was leaving that day, and I didn't show even the slightest sign of reluctance. The moment he reminded me that he was about to go, I actually smiled for the first time since he came back. It was the happiest he had seen me in days, like his departure was the best news I'd heard all year. I cheerfully helped him and Zoe carry their luggage, and even accompanied them all the way to the station. On the way, Ethan tried several times to start a conversation with me, but I skillfully dodged him every time. In the end, he didn't manage to get a single private word with me. As he stepped into the station with Zoe and Logan, he glanced back at me. I stood there just outside, wearing a smile he couldn't read. My lips moved silently, saying something he couldn't make out. He didn't know how to read lips, but with how happy I looked, he figured I was saying something nice. Finally, I had sent off Ethan and Zoe, those two despicable traitors. I was thrilled. Ethan, enjoy your time with Zoe. I'm really hoping you two have lots of kids together. Please don't let me down. The very same day, Ethan took Zoe with him to the military base. I officially entered my do-nothing era. I stopped pushing Lily to practice her exercises for her polio, stopped caring whether the pigs or cows were fed, and stopped checking on the crops in the fields. I only needed to take care of myself. One mouth to feed, no one else to worry about. I slept in every morning until the sun was high in the sky. After breakfast, I would take a basket and wander off. In my last life, Claire had been the only one in the whole village who treated me kindly. So now, I helped her with everything from sowing seeds to gathering pigweed, herding cattle, and doing housework. Sometimes I stayed for dinner, sometimes the whole day. Margaret and her husband used to call me lazy and useless. Well, I decided I might as well live up to the name. I gave the performance of a lifetime. Without me around to order about, they had no choice but to go work the fields themselves. The grueling labor wore them down fast, and neither of them was happy about it. Margaret came storming over, shouting insults and trying to guilt-trip me back into being their unpaid maid. She tried to rally the village's opinion against me. I simply smiled and said in front of everyone, "Didn't you tell Ethan I'm lazy, useless, and sneaky? Well, I'm just doing exactly what you said. If you're not satisfied, I can leave. Maybe I'll go join your son at the military base. Wouldn't that solve your problem?" The moment I mentioned going to the base to find Ethan, Margaret froze. She didn't dare escalate things. After all, she and Zoe had already schemed everything. They were counting on Zoe having Ethan's child soon. If I showed up there and ruined their plans, it would all fall apart. So she gave up on making me work. But then she got crafty again. She sent Lily, who still had difficulty moving around, to me, hoping I'd soften up and go back to my old self. But she miscalculated badly. Everyone in that household had hurt me, but none of them had hurt me as deeply as Lily did in my past life. Of all the people I resented most, she was at the top of the list. Did they really think I would take care of her again? I looked Margaret dead in the eye and said, "She's Ethan's daughter, not mine. What does she have to do with me? If your son doesn't care about her, why should I? And just so you know, even if she dropped dead right now, I wouldn't shed a single tear." Margaret left Lily beside me and assumed I'd eventually give in. I didn't. Lily sat outside in the blazing sun for the entire day, and I never once looked her way. Margaret finally came back to take her home. She understood now. Lily wasn't mine. I had every reason to ignore her. By that point, I had changed so much that Margaret and her husband didn't know what to do anymore. Time passed quickly. Without me around to be their free labor, Margaret and her husband had to get up early and work hard in the fields every day. They were exhausted day after day, and I didn't give them a single penny from the salary Ethan sent home. Their lives became miserable, but they didn't dare complain. They didn't write letters or make calls to tell Ethan to come discipline me because they had too much to hide. They were terrified that anything might disrupt Zoe and Ethan's little family-building project. And just like that, 6 months flew by. After roughly estimating the timing, I called Claire, the woman who had revealed the truth to me in my last life. As soon as she picked up, she sounded alarmed. "Molly, something big just happened. I was at the hospital yesterday and saw your husband there with Zoe. He took her to the OBGYN. And Molly?" Zoe looked very pregnant. Her belly was huge. No idea whose baby it is. Zoe's pregnancy was news even to Ethan. He had been swamped with missions recently, focusing on career advancement. He'd been thinking about finally bringing me and our child to live with him. But the night he first brought Zoe to the base and helped her settle in, something happened. That night, Ethan felt unwell, restless, mentally foggy. And then Zoe showed up in his room naked. He claimed he'd gotten up to push her away, but somehow his resistance melted. That night, they ended up in bed together. When he fully realized what he'd done, Ethan slapped himself hard across the face multiple times. Zoe, crying, told him it wasn't his fault. She took the blame, saying she missed her late husband too much, that she had confused Ethan for him in a moment of weakness. Even though Zoe didn't blame him, Ethan couldn't forgive himself. He knew he'd made a huge, unforgivable mistake. The next morning, he moved out of that apartment and into the dorms. He threw himself into mission after mission, punishing himself with work. Over the past 6 months, he had worked so hard that even his commanding officers stepped in and forced him to take leave. But even during his break, he avoided seeing Zoe. He was too embarrassed. He chose to stay at the dorms. One night, while lying in bed, he wrote me a letter, then finally allowed himself to rest. That night, Ethan had a nightmare. A strange, terrifying dream. In it, Zoe's belly swelled like a balloon. She gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. They smiled at him and called him Daddy. He panicked, turned around, and tried to run. Then in the same dream, I appeared. I was holding a knife, charging at Zoe. The next thing he saw, I was gunned down, lying in a pool of blood. My eyes were open wide, filled with hatred and pain. Ethan shot awake, soaked in sweat. It was just a dream, not real, but it left him shaking with fear. He hadn't seen Zoe in 5 months. He had no idea what condition she was in. Could she really be as pregnant as she looked in the dream? The thought alone terrified him. As soon as the sun rose, he rushed back to the apartment the military had assigned to Zoe. The moment he pushed open the door, the scene he feared most unfolded before him. Zoe, heavily pregnant, was standing there smiling at him. His worst fear had come true. He knew then that he had no feelings for her. The child inside her was nothing more than the result of a chaotic night. He had to fix this. That child couldn't stay. Without hesitation, Ethan brought Zoe to the hospital. The child had to be removed, but the doctor told him it wasn't that simple. The pregnancy was far along, twins again, and termination at that stage carried major risks. Zoe dropped to her knees, sobbing, begging him to let her keep the babies. She promised she wouldn't interfere in his life. She said she would disappear quietly after giving birth and raise the children alone. As if nothing had happened. Ethan's heart softened. After all, he had been part of that night. It wasn't all Zoe's fault. He couldn't put the entire burden on her. He told himself he had to find a solution, one that wouldn't destroy everything. But before he could come up with anything, I showed up. It was a sunny, peaceful day. Ethan was inside discussing options with Zoe. After careful thought, he had finally decided the babies had to go. It was the only way to clean up the mess. When Zoe heard the decision, she burst into tears and collapsed to the floor, refusing. She clung to Ethan's leg, pleading with him to let her give birth. "Please," she sobbed. "Let me have these babies. I won't bother you. I swear." Logan, their son, dropped to his knees too, joining Zoe and begging. The two of them huddled together, crying uncontrollably. Ethan was overwhelmed with frustration. He got up and walked out to the balcony to smoke. He hadn't even finished his cigarette when he heard loud shouting outside the front gate. A woman's voice, shrill and full of rage, was screaming, and it was mixed with the unmistakable sound of a child crying. There was a low buzz of voices outside, people gossiping. Ethan couldn't make out every word clearly, but he caught fragments like homewrecker, pregnant, and worse than pigs and dogs. The words made him deeply uncomfortable. It felt like they were talking about him. He flicked away his cigarette, turned around, and was about to head back inside when he saw a group of people approaching along the path to the military compound. Most of them were in uniform, but two stood out, a woman and a child. The child was being carried by one of the soldiers while the woman walked beside them, her arms flailing, clearly emotional about something. Ethan froze. The closer they came, the more uneasy he felt. He didn't know why, but the woman's gestures, her silhouette, the way she moved, it all reminded him of Molly. No, it couldn't be her. Molly would never show up unannounced. That wasn't like her at all. It must be someone else. Still, he couldn't stop staring, and they kept coming closer and closer until he could clearly make out the woman's face. It was Molly. Panic hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He turned and bolted back into the living room. Zoe was still sitting on the floor, sobbing. "Hide," he snapped. "Hurry, you need to hide now." Zoe looked up at him, confused. "What? Just do it." Ethan barked. He rushed over, trying to pull her to her feet, frantically thinking where he could possibly stash her. She couldn't stay here. Not when Molly was about to walk through that door. He had to get her out. His mind was a mess, swirling with panic. He grabbed Zoe by the arm and dragged her toward the exit, thinking if he could just get her out of sight fast enough, maybe he could prevent everything from blowing up. But the moment they reached the front door, a pair of guards stepped into their path. One of them flashed a badge. "Command has instructed us to bring you in for questioning, Sergeant Ethan Miller. Please stand by for an investigation." Ethan's heart sank. It was over. He knew what was coming, and he knew he couldn't run from it. He froze, paralyzed by the weight of what he had done. Zoe, however, lost her mind. She screamed at the guards, demanding they move aside. "You can't stop us. This is none of your business." But it was already too late. The noise had drawn the attention of the group outside. Within seconds, the front gate flew open, and then there she was. Molly stepped through the gate, Her gaze locked onto Ethan with piercing intensity. Their eyes met. In that instant, Ethan saw it. Pure mockery in her expression. Then Molly suddenly let out a wail and charged at him. "You sick bastard. You disgusting piece of garbage. How could you do this to me?" Tears streamed down her face as she screamed. "I stayed at home raising a disabled child, taking care of your damn parents, and you were here screwing your sister-in-law." As she screamed, she slapped Ethan across the face with full force, hard and fast. It was one of the moments she had been waiting for most since her rebirth. The chance to slap this despicable man with everything she had. And she didn't stop there. She clawed at him. Blood soon streaked down Ethan's once handsome face. But he didn't fight back. He just stood there and let her unleash every bit of her fury. Zoe stood frozen, horrified. But as soon as she snapped out of it and saw Ethan getting hit like that, rage overtook her. "You stop that. You stop it right now," she shouted, lunging toward Molly. The only thing that met her was a loud crack as Molly slapped her across the face. Then again and again. "Are you even human?" Molly yelled. "There are plenty of men in this world. Why did you have to steal mine? You shameless homewrecker." Zoe's face turned purple and red, her lips bleeding. She tried to speak, but what could she possibly say? Since that night with Ethan, when she found out she was pregnant, she had started introducing herself to everyone as Ethan's wife. All the military families around believed her. She had wrapped herself in that identity so tightly, she began to believe it herself. The last thing she expected was for Molly to show up, exploding through her carefully constructed fantasy like a thunderstorm. If she had known Molly would strike back like this, she should have kept it all hidden. But there's no such thing as should have now. As the onlookers watched Ethan and the very pregnant Zoe standing there in the open, even the soldiers, bound by strict discipline, couldn't hide the contempt on their faces. They weren't allowed to speak, but military spouses weren't under the same rules. Those who knew what had happened were livid. "Shameless," someone hissed. "Seriously, has she no shame at all? Aren't there any decent men left in the world? Had to go after her own brother-in-law. It takes two to tango," another spat. "The man's garbage, too. Left his wife and kid behind just to bring his sister-in-law along. What a joke. Maybe he just didn't want that crippled kid anymore." "That's still no excuse," a woman snapped. "The child didn't ask to be born disabled." Through all this, Lily, who had been quietly carried by a soldier, confused and silent, suddenly began to struggle. She wriggled her way down, crawled toward Zoe, and knelt in front of her, face streaked with tears. "Please, Aunt Zoe," she said clearly. "Please give my dad back to us. I'm begging you. Please give him back. Mommy and I don't need money. We'll work harder. You can keep all the money. Just don't take my daddy away." Ethan was escorted away by the guards. The fallout from this scandal was massive. He wasn't just accused of moral misconduct and inappropriate relationships. People had seen with their own eyes the disabled child tearfully begging for her father. Everyone was emotionally wrecked. The idea that Ethan had been serving two families was unthinkable. This wasn't the old world. It was the new China. No one could believe such futile, backward behavior still existed. To the higher-ups, it was worse than a personal failure. It was ideological corruption. He had prioritized having a son over doing the right thing. Worse, they believed he tried to abandon a disabled child. Someone like that had no place in the army. The ruling came down swiftly. Ethan was expelled from the party, forcibly discharged, and sent back to the countryside. All I wanted was a divorce, a clean break, no more ties. The base commander listened to everything I had to say, then made several calls to verify my story. When he hung up, he looked at me with genuine sympathy. The divorce went through smoothly. No resistance, nothing holding it up. The day I got the divorce certificate, I felt amazing. Ethan had finally paid a price, but not nearly enough. I was still waiting to see the rest of the Millers get what they deserved. I returned to the village not long after Ethan and Zoe had been sent back in disgrace. Their return caused a stir. The entire village came out to gawk. Voices rose from every corner, condemning and ridiculing them. Ethan kept his head down, silent, walking straight home. As for Margaret and her husband, their faces fell when they realized their golden boy's future was over. And when they saw Zoe very much pregnant, their warm attitude instantly turned cold. Compared to passing on the family name, it turned out their son's future was more important. After all, Margaret no longer treated Zoe with the kindness she once lavished. Zoe and Logan kept a low profile, finally learning what it meant to live with shame. Despite her big belly, Zoe's legs were just fine. Her back didn't ache. Her dizzy spells mysteriously vanished. She got up early, helped around the house, even worked in the fields. But none of it won Margaret over. Every day, Margaret cursed her under her breath. "You bring nothing but death and bad luck," she spat. "How many times have I told you to stop drooling over my son? If you need a man so badly, go find someone else. Why cling to him like a leech? You've ruined everything. Happy now?" Zoe didn't dare talk back. She swallowed every insult. After a full week of putting up with Margaret's vicious tongue, I finally returned, this time with Lily, the daughter they had all conveniently forgotten. When Margaret heard I was back, old grudges came rushing back. She stormed out of the house and tried to attack me, thinking I was still the Molly she used to bully, but I wasn't. I grabbed her by the hair and slapped her across the face hard. Over and over. Blood ran from her nose and mouth as she screamed. This time, she knew she couldn't win. She shrank back, crawling toward home in humiliation. I didn't rush. I walked behind her slowly, calmly, with Lily in tow and a group of villagers watching. When Margaret reached her door and tried to slam it shut, I stepped forward, blocked it with my foot, and shoved Lily through like a hen tossing a chick back into the coop. Then I turned to Zoe. I've returned his biological daughter to him. The villagers who had followed me for the drama erupted in confusion. "Molly, what do you mean by that? What are you talking about? We're all completely lost here." "Yeah, Molly, isn't Lily your daughter?" I faced the curious crowd and raised my voice. "Since everyone's so curious, I'll tell you the truth. Lily is not my daughter. She's Zoe's daughter. My own son. He died right after he was born." Gasps filled the air. If Lily is Zoe's daughter, then why did she give her to you to raise? Isn't it obvious? I said, my tone turning cold. After Zoe and Ethan started sneaking around behind everyone's back, they wanted me to stay in the dark and work myself to death like their personal servant. So they passed Zoe's child off as mine. They gave me her daughter to raise. And not just any child, a disabled one. That's monstrous. They made you raise someone else's child, and a disabled one at that. Of course they did. That whole family never worked. Molly was the one doing everything. Taking care of the land, the animals, the house, and on top of that, she was nursing Lily too. They're disgusting evil. That's not even all, someone else added. Margaret, that old witch, was telling everyone that Molly was cursed, that she gave birth to a disabled child who brought misfortune to the Miller family. She even said her older son died because Molly jinxed him. I remember that, another villager said. I believed it back then. Me too. We all thought Molly was the problem. But turns out she was their blessing. No kidding. Look what happened to the Millers right after she divorced Ethan. Their whole family's fallen apart. They deserved it. While everyone talked and Lily sobbed nearby, Ethan finally appeared. He'd been gone a week and it showed. His face was sunken. The scratches I'd left on him still hadn't healed. He stumbled toward the doorway, stopping short when he heard what I'd said. Molly, what you just said. Is it true? He asked in disbelief. Our child, he's really gone. Lily really belongs to my brother? I stared at him. You didn't know? Wasn't Lily the bargaining chip you and your precious Zoe used to trap me into slaving for your family? I swear I didn't know, Ethan said, his voice trembling. I swear I never did that to you. I don't believe you, I said coldly. But even if I did, it doesn't matter. Lily is a Miller. She's Zoe's daughter. She has nothing to do with me. I'm giving her back to you. This is where we end. I turned to leave. Ethan stepped forward to stop me. I met his eyes, my voice like ice. I have nothing more to say to you. If murder weren't illegal, I would have gladly killed every last one of you. That made him freeze. He saw the hatred in my eyes, and he didn't dare move. I sneered. Don't think this is over, Ethan. Your family's punishment is just beginning. I'm going to watch every one of you pay for what you've done. This wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I meant every word. The downfall of the Millers was just getting started. I've never believed in karma. I've always believed in revenge, the kind you deliver with your own hands. Like stripping Ethan of his military honor and sending him and Zoe crawling back to the countryside with nothing. Now that he had nothing left, I wanted to see if Zoe still loved him enough to stay and have his child. Maybe she did fall for his pretty face. But let's see how far that takes her when reality sets in. Let's see how long she lasts, especially when there are not one but two elderly parents lying in bed completely unable to care for themselves. Will she keep pretending, keep smiling? We'll see. Claire dragged me back home, so we could catch up. The Millers' shouting carried on well into the next day. According to the neighbor who had been eavesdropping through the walls, Ethan had demanded answers about Lily. Zoe and Margaret had no way out. They finally confessed that during the time I had been unconscious, they hatched the plan together to pass Zoe's daughter off as mine, so they could use me as free labor and childcare. Ethan hadn't known. Not at the time. But that didn't matter anymore because whether he knew or not, the pain and betrayal I suffered in my past life were real. After a full night of chaos and shouting in the Miller household, an even bigger piece of news broke the next day. Margaret had fallen down the stairs. She'd stepped on a weak step while going upstairs, and it gave way. She tumbled down hard and had to be rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. In my last life, Margaret had faked a broken leg to keep me from following Ethan, forcing me to stay and serve her for 2 long years. But this time, she got exactly what she deserved. For real. Now she was truly disabled. And I can't lie, it brought me a quiet kind of satisfaction. Like I've always said, revenge doesn't wait for divine justice. It takes planning. It takes action. That staircase had already been unstable. I just took a blade and quietly deepened the cracks in the right place. All it needed was a nudge. I gave it one. Margaret fractured her tailbone. She would never walk again. And that was just the beginning. A few days later, Ethan's father, Hank, went up the mountain to cut grass and fell into a ravine. His legs snapped. The whole village was buzzing with gossip. They're finally getting their karma, people said. The Millers have done so many awful things even heaven can't ignore it anymore. But I knew better. This wasn't karma. I knew Hank went up that mountain regularly. So I set a trap, left a few scattered bills on the ground where I knew he'd pass. Temptation did the rest. He saw the money, got greedy, and ignored the risk. So no, it wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. With both Margaret and Hank now bedridden and immobile, the burden of caregiving fell squarely on Zoe. For someone who'd lived a pampered life, being a caregiver was a rude awakening. Cooking a meal, washing clothes, she could handle that. But cleaning up bedpans, wiping bodies, listening to Margaret's vile mouth day and night, not a chance. After just 2 miserable weeks of enduring that toxic household, Zoe cracked. She wanted out. Ethan wouldn't allow it. Not a chance. So, she got slapped around and shoved right back into her role. Margaret's mental state had completely collapsed. She'd always been a spiteful, manipulative woman. Now she'd turned full-blown deranged. She blamed Zoe for everything. If Zoe hadn't chased Ethan, if Zoe hadn't gotten pregnant, the family wouldn't be ruined. Ethan would still be in the military, rising through the ranks. She and her husband wouldn't be stuck rotting in bed. They were supposed to be enjoying the good life by now. Margaret didn't reflect for a second on her own part in all this. Sure, Zoe had pursued Ethan, but Margaret had been more than willing. People like her never take responsibility. They just dig themselves deeper into blame and bitterness. And when Zoe was just a few minutes late in cleaning up one of their messes, Margaret snapped. She grabbed Zoe by the hair and yanked hard. Even though her legs didn't work, Margaret's arms still had strength. She slapped Zoe across the face again and again, pulling her hair so violently it nearly tore from the roots. But Zoe, spoiled or not, was still human. She had a temper too. She fought back. In the struggle, Margaret got dragged off the bed. Her head slammed into the sharp corner of the table. Blood poured out like a fountain. Her grip on Zoe's hair weakened, then went limp. Zoe screamed. Terrified, she bolted for the door to call for help. But she tripped on the threshold, hit the ground hard, and blood spilled beneath her, too. By the time Ethan returned from working outside and came through the door, it was already too late. Margaret was dead, bled out. Zoe had miscarried. She lay there barely conscious. In my last life, those twin children had died before they were even born. Now it had happened again. But this time, Zoe also faced prison. After all, Margaret's death wasn't accidental. Zoe had played a role. She wouldn't get the death penalty, but prison time was guaranteed. And that's how I witnessed the downfall of the entire Miller family. I didn't stick around. With cash in hand, I boarded a train and headed to Shenzhen. Right as China was entering a new era of reform and opening, armed with the knowledge from my past life, I began building a business from scratch. I started with a street stall, grinding every day, watching every trend, learning with every step. 10 years passed. My business grew bigger and bigger. I built a brand. I opened multiple stores. And somewhere along the way, in the midst of all that hard work, I met a man, someone honest, someone kind, someone who believed in the same future I did. It took us 3 years to go from strangers to partners to soulmates. And eventually, I stepped into marriage again. But this time there were no lies, no betrayal, no manipulation. Only two people giving their hearts to each other sincerely and equally. Life after marriage was fulfilling and peaceful. In the 3rd year, I got pregnant and gave birth to our child. He was the sweetest little thing. Watching him grow day by day, I finally stepped out of the nightmare that had haunted me for so long. That ugly chapter of my life in the countryside more than a decade ago had completely faded from my memory. Until one day while traveling, I ran into Claire. Claire looked completely different from how she'd been back in the village. She had permed waves in her hair, wore high heels, and her makeup was flawless. When she called my name, I didn't even recognize her at first. We were old acquaintances after all, so we went out for dinner. After we were full and a little tipsy, Claire brought up the Millers. Zoe had been released after serving 8 years in prison. With nowhere else to go, she returned to the Miller house, intending to rebuild her life with Ethan. Ethan accepted her back. He was, after all, alone and struggling. He still had to care for the disabled Lily and for Hank, who had been bedridden for years. No one expected what happened next. On the night of Ethan and Zoe's low-key wedding, 15-year-old Lily picked up a knife and stabbed Zoe in the chest over and over again. As she stabbed, Lily kept muttering strange, jumbled words. "It's all your fault. If not for you, none of this would have happened to me. I should have been cured by now. I should have been normal. You ruined everything. You're the reason I'm like this. You disgusting woman. You did this to me." Zoe died that night. The medics couldn't save her. Lily was taken into custody. She laughed hysterically and babbled nonsense. People said she'd completely lost her mind. A psychiatric evaluation confirmed it. She was declared mentally unstable. She was sent to a mental institution and would likely spend the rest of her life there. I didn't feel a shred of sympathy for the Millers. I just smiled as Claire told me everything. She went on to say that Hank had passed away. Ethan was now working as a low-paid security guard somewhere, making maybe $500 a month. I didn't care. They were irrelevant to my life now. But fate is strange. I never expected to actually run into Ethan again. My husband and I had taken our child on a trip, staying at a high-end hotel. And there he was, Ethan, standing outside in a cheap security uniform. He looked so much older, worn out. He stared at me as I walked past him, my son in one hand, my husband's arm in the other. I didn't even look his way. The next morning, as I stepped out of the hotel, Ethan was already waiting for me. He stopped me and said he wanted to talk. I turned him down without hesitation. Still, he rushed to say a few words before I could walk away. "Molly, you came back too, didn't you?" His voice was low. "I came back after you left. I didn't get to fix anything before it was too late. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant to get involved with Zoe. She tricked me." By the time I realized what was happening, she was 6 months pregnant. The doctor said terminating it would be dangerous. I didn't know how to explain it to you. I didn't know you'd come find me. I didn't know Zoe would be that cruel, that manipulative. After I heard about your death, it tore me up inside. Molly, they launched an investigation after you died. I got discharged. Zoe was arrested. None of us ended well. And about the child switch, I swear I had no idea. That was all my mother and Zoe. I'd heard enough. I looked at him, expression flat. So, what's your point? You think if you come running now and spit out some apology, I'll forgive you? I took a deep breath and said, word by word, let me be perfectly clear. I will never forgive you. Not in this life, not in any life. Stop dreaming.